tree, which is more of the what, how questions of problem solving. The next is a hypothesis tree, which asks you a lot of questions of why. Why are certain things happening in this problem? And then there's the yes or no tree. So a deductive logic tree breaks down the problem definition into different parts. It has measurements and metrics typically, and a lot of times you'll be asking specific questions, like what is happening in this scenario? Why is it happening? How is it happening? And typically your starting position when you're using one of these types of tree is when you have an entirely new problem. It's something you've never seen before. The second type is a hypothesis tree. The hypothesis tree starts with a hypothesis, and basically through the tree, you're actually proving or disproving the logic of your hypothesis. So the elements of this tree are typically reasons. So I believe that my pizza store is not making enough money because the demographics of the neighborhood that I'm in have shifted. That's a hypothesis. And I would basically use a hypothesis tree to identify whether or not that was an accurate identification of my problem. Finally, the yes-no tree is made of questions that can be answered with yes or no. And essentially it allows you to get to a deeper understanding of the problem and therefore many ideas about potential measures and measurement issues that you may be having. So here's an example of a logic tree. So you start with your problem statement and then you identify 3 different issues or opportunities. We highlight the fact that they're opportunities because when you're going into problem solving, you want to make sure you're being solution oriented. So just because there's an issue doesn't mean that that doesn't also provide you or your organization an opportunity to be successful or a new opportunity to make new growth, make more impact. And then finally, within these different issues, there are things called sub-issues. So we don't have time to do the activity, but I'll read it to you and kind of walk through the process of what we would be thinking. So the background is you're the owner of a pizza store that has been a neighborhood staple for the past decade. Recently, the neighborhood has been changing. Many of the younger people have moved closer to the downtown area, and several grocery stores have opened up in the immediate area. And substantially. So the person who's the owner is trying to figure out what could have happened. So in this example, obviously this is a more simplistic version of what would happen in your organizations. But in this example, the problem is the owner is not having pizza sales. He's not generating revenue for his company. The first issue is that the neighborhood has been changing and many of the younger residents have moved downtown. A lot of younger people like pizza, right? That's a potential issue. The second issue is that several grocery stores have opened up in their area. I don't know about you guys, but I personally love the frozen pizzas in grocery stores and ate a lot of them this weekend. But that could be a second potential issue. It's providing other opportunities for people to buy pizzas. The third issue is that the construction company that's spilling materials into your lot is preventing people from parking there. I'm also very lazy. I really like to drive places. So if I can't drive to get your pizza, I'm probably going to drive to the grocery store to get your pizza. So these are just an example of how you can build a logic tree to start constructing solutions to problems, right? Cool. So another way of problem solving, and this one is definitely used more in the social impact space, is through design thinking. So constantly evolving business and technology landscapes, as we're seeing today, require a lot more creative and iterative thinking processes. Design thinking is one of these processes. Design thinking focuses on user experiences. It creates models to examine complex problems. And it also uses prototypes to explore potential solutions. The most important thing about design thinking, and especially why it's important in the social impact space, is that it actually tolerates failure. Because your designs are iterative, you're actually kind of planning for failure and assuming that you will fail. All right, so here's the activity. All of you should have either a piece of paper or something that you can write on the back of. So I want you to take that out right now. On where? There should be scrap paper in your folders, apparently. Missing pens. Okay. All right, if you have a pen or if you can borrow a neighbor's pen, that would be ideal. If not, you guys can talk about it as a group, so it doesn't matter too much. What I want you to do is on whatever piece of paper you have, I want you to draw like a table that has 6 boxes. Does that make sense? Just like lines? Yeah, you can do a line and then 2. Yeah, just 6 boxes that you can draw in. Sure. Okay. So now that you've done this, either pick one person in your table or partner up. And for the one person you pick or your partner, decide who's going to be the drawer. Sorry, if you are in partners, decide who's going to be the person drawing. And if you're picking one person in your table, then everyone else is drawing. Does that make sense? No. Okay. All right. Just let's do it this way. Everyone partner up. And if you don't have a partner, just pick a team of 3 and decide that one person is drawing. Okay? Okay. Okay, once you've decided who that person is, here's how this activity will work. Keep in mind this is a very simplified version of design thinking. If you are really interested in learning it, I highly suggest going to a class. I took a 6-hour course one. It was really incredible. This is my version of kind of making it a short activity so you guys get the idea, okay? So what you're gonna do is one person in your group or the partner, the person that is not drawing, is gonna talk about a wallet. Okay, so you're going to identify as a person what kind of things you like in a wallet. So for example, I hate the Velcro wallets. I don't like them. I don't want them anywhere near me, but I lose things a lot. So I would love a wallet that actually keeps my things safe. I don't like leather wallets. I would prefer a wallet that is made of some other material. I would love a wallet that I could find because I lose things a lot. And sometimes like if I could locate it, that would be great. I also like wallets that maybe would prevent from being stolen, if that's possible. Anything that you can think of is like what I might like in a wallet, if anything in the whole world is possible. Then you guys who are drawing, your job is to create 6 different wallets that this person could have, okay? If you want to pick something else, that's fine. The wallet example works.
So I'm walking away. Testing, testing, testing. Testing, testing. Martha, can you test the other one?
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, testing. I think we're live. I'll run the mic here. Can we get somebody to run it over to that end of the room?
Roger that.
We're gonna
Karaoke?
I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to cut it out. But yeah, the idea is just for them to understand that like an iterative process. And
You saw that we get feedback.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, just turn that
Yes, no problem. So basically, one of you would.
I don't know where I'll find her. I thought she was
Whatever, anything under the sun, anything. Just like you could even say you want college. All of which we might like.
So that means I have to provide a specific information.
No, we provide whatever information you want, and then
What's the responsibility?
No problem. Yeah, exactly. So it's not even, this is like one part, it's not even just thank you. Hey guys. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to circle you back just because we're short on time. I know you probably have not finished all 6 of your wallets. But the purpose of this activity, and normally, again, if we had enough time, we'd share and talk about them all because it's pretty funny, right? You're like, probably some of you had wallets with wings and like weird things like that. Hey, can I get everybody's attention? Okay, guys, okay, thank you. So the purpose of this activity and the purpose of design thinking is essentially that you are trying to identify when you're looking at a problem, any solution under the sun, regardless of restrictions, regardless of anything that you can think of that might be a potential problem. You're trying to imagine all of the creative solutions that could be possible in a perfect world. And then from there, you're using iterative thinking and iterative design to kind of whittle out which ones are the best solutions for your particular problem. So that's the purpose of design thinking, and that's kind of what the actual activity is meant to do. So we'll get into a little bit more depth in terms of when you're doing a creative meeting or when you're trying to do design thinking.
Okay. So, can everyone hear me?
Try Emron. Emron, is yours working? Yeah. Maybe it's the water.
Great. Sorry about that. I apparently started going underwater. So with that being said, we'll move on. But essentially, design thinking is another one of these logic models with logic trees and mind mapping and a number of other things that you can use as a project manager to be able to problem solve anything that comes up with your team. Cool. So now we're going to go into what it means to be a leader. So as you guys know, there's a huge difference between being a leader and being a manager. You can be a great manager, but you can never be a leader in your lifetime if you don't really take the initiative to make a difference between those two things. So the first thing that's important when you're leading a team is to be sure that you're managing expectations through clear communication. So the first thing that you want to be always cognizant of is being transparent. Being clear and honest about your policies, your procedures, your values, and everything else when you're managing a project is, especially at the onset of your relationship, both with your team and with any stakeholders you have, is critical in terms of being able to manage your expectations throughout the whole life cycle. Also, you want to make sure that you're consistently under-promising and over-delivering. So what we mean by that is ensuring that whenever you're promising something, whether it be to a client, whether it be to a potential partner, or whether it be to your team members, you're never promising something that you cannot achieve. So say your team comes to you and they say, hey, we really, really need you to look at this PowerPoint deck for the partner that we're about to meet with next Monday. And you know that you have a lot of work, but it's something that you need to get done. So you say, Yes, I will look at it tonight. But you don't get to it that night. What does that do? It erodes your team's trust in you and their ability to count on you to do the things that they need you to do. So then they start doing things for you, or they start not consulting you when they're trying to make things happen. So you need to ensure that you're always, always taking stock of what you can actually achieve, and you're under promising and over delivering. Constant communication is also key. So what do we mean by that? I don't mean like pinging somebody every day and saying, hey, how are you? What are you doing this weekend? Things like that. I mean setting up regular checkpoints to ensure that not only are you connecting with every single team member, but also connecting regularly with your partners, even if you have nothing in particular to say. This is where a lot of people falter. So sometimes projects can take up to 6 months to get to a point where it hits the metrics that you would then have a conversation with the partner about next steps, right? But you don't want to wait that entire 6-month period to have a second conversation with them. You can update them along the way, or even if you have nothing to say, check in with them, see what their needs are, see how things are going. Make sure that that line of communication is constantly open. One of the other reasons for doing that is because it also provides a channel of feedback, right? If the communication channel is open, they're able to give you consistent feedback, and they trust that you actually care about that communication, you care about the feedback that they're giving. Last, reporting. You want to make sure that you're consistently reporting using, as we discussed earlier, very good, smart measurables and metrics that are good both for your team to understand and for whatever external stakeholders you have. By consistently reporting, you're not only showing your team or the external stakeholders what you're achieving, but you're also able to, from a logical level, have constant communication about what needs improvement, and it takes away the emotional aspect, right? If I'm leading a team, say for this global leadership lab, and we're supposed to create 4 presentations in a week time period, and the team only delivers 3, I can report to them, hey, looking at this, we only have 3 of the presentations done. We needed to have 4. You guys we aren't performing at the level that we need to be performing. And it removes all emotion from that conversation because it's just hard numbers and hard reporting. The other thing you want to take account of as a leader instead of just a manager is how to actually lead your team to success. So there are a couple of things that you will always want to be aware of. One is mentorship. So even if you personally have not taken a class or don't know how to mentor, ensuring that your team members get mentorship either within or outside of your organization is paramount. It's going to be really important for them and their professional development and their emotional investment within your team and within the project. Another thing you're going to want to be aware of is providing direction. So this is where some managers and some leaders get caught up. The managers are going to be providing direction, but are also going to be telling you how to do something, right? So a manager, and especially a micromanager, will say, we need these spreadsheets to be done by Friday. This is exactly what I want you to do. A good leader will provide that direction. We need to provide the client with this information so that they can be successful. But a good leader will not necessarily always provide every single step from point A to point B. They will provide only what is necessary to give that person direction, and they will allow that person to have the creative ability to get from point A to point B on their own. That's not to say that you go in, tell them what to do, and drop the mic and leave. But you go in, you help them with whatever they need, and you allow them to have the freedom and creativity to make sure that they are actually impacting the client or the partner or whoever it is on their own. The other thing you want to ensure is always, always available on your team is feedback loops. You want to create a culture of open and honest communication with your team. If your team feels that they cannot come to you and say honestly how they're feeling, they won't have trust in you as a leader, and they also won't be able to be as effective as they possibly could be. The last 2 are very, very important and are key cornerstones. The first one is professional development. You always want your team members to be improving themselves while they are a member of your team. This not only helps you as a team leader because they gain assets and skills that they can use to make their work better, but it also helps them and ensures that their morale while on the project or while part of the organization is always at the highest level that it can be because they're feeling fulfilled and they're also feeling cared about. They feel that their professional development and that their career is actually important to you. The final one is accountability. So accountability is a little difficult because it's hard to quantify, right? But you want to make sure that accountability is not only transparent, that everyone in the team knows exactly what everybody else is doing and are holding them accountable, but also that it's reversed so that you as a leader are letting them hold you accountable to what you promise. So again, under promising, over delivering, and circling back to that. So now we'll talk about a little bit about influencing. I'm just going to check how we are on time. Cool. So when you're when you're trying to influence decisions, either of your team or of external stakeholders, you want to consider a couple key things. The first is building support. You do that first off by either team awareness or organizational awareness. So team awareness would be things like understanding how your team members are feeling. Are they feeling burned out? Are they thinking that the workload that they have currently is too high and they can't possibly manage something else? If you're trying to influence them to take something else on, having those ideas of what's happening with them is very important. When you're talking about external stakeholders, organizational awareness is paramount. You need to understand exactly what's happening with the organization as best as you can, even if you're not a part of it, and understand what the person that you're talking to's key issues are. What are they struggling with? What things make them wake up in the morning and go to work? Those kinds of ideas and insights will help you influence their decisions because it builds a level of trust. They feel that you really empathize with them and understand them. Great. Then moving over to empathy. Again, you want to have interpersonal awareness and you want to be focusing on how to empower them. So if it's your team members, how are you empowering them to take initiative? How are you making sure that they take on leadership, even if they're not necessarily in a leadership role? You also want to be interpersonally aware. How do you come off? I'll tell you a story. For the longest time when I was little, I never thought I was bossy. I'm really bossy. People have to tell me to stop being bossy sometimes. But no one told me that when I was younger because we were all little kids and we're really nice. And then one day, one of my friends was like, hey, by the way, you're really bossy. And it entirely changed the way that I interacted with people. But you have to have a certain level of self-awareness in terms of how you come across. And if you don't have that level of self-awareness, you need to find a colleague or a trusted friend who's going to tell you. Because I cannot tell you how many times partnerships, teams, anything has fallen apart because of the lack of self-awareness with people. Another thing is the tone. So a lot of times, a lot of us will get really bogged down in what we're working on, right? You'll have a day where you're really stressed out, where everything seems like it's just too much, and that will affect how you react to people and your tone, right? As a manager, as a project leader, you always want to be aware of how you are approaching people when you're speaking to them. So if somebody comes to you with a problem, they're probably very stressed and upset too. And if it makes you more stressed, you cannot let that show. You cannot have that tone when you're approaching them because it'll just make them diminish and feel that they can't come to you when they have problems or that they can't trust you to be respectful of their feelings. And the last part is considering outcomes. So you want to first off look at where the mutual gain is. So outside of your team, if we're talking about external stakeholders, when you're trying to partner with somebody or when you're trying to ensure that a client gets what they need or a customer gets what they need, what mutual gains are there? If I do something, what is the benefit to me? What is the benefit to them? Kind of understanding the value proposition on both ends is key to be able to influence a decision one way or another. Now we'll talk very briefly about negotiating. So I know some of you were in the GLL in the fall, and that we talked about negotiating a little bit. But there are a couple elements of negotiation. You have the interests of the parties on the table. You have the options of what you could be negotiating. You have the alternatives to these options, so what else is available. You have the legitimacy, so which option or which alternative is the most legitimate of the ones we can pick. You have the communication, or the way that you communicate these options and alternatives. You have the relationship itself, so how are we interacting? How do you feel about me? Do you trust me as a potential partner? And then finally, the commitment. So once we've discussed all these things, once we've figured out the value on both ends, what are we committing? Who's responsible for what? What are our roles here? So these elements are useful for preparing for a negotiation, defining what a successful negotiation looks like, and then also organizing your thoughts and approaches when you're going into a negotiation. And then when you're talking about negotiation, one of the most common methods of negotiating is something called the mutual gains approach, which again, those of you that were here in the fall have seen already. But basically you're looking at the defining traits of a process, protection for the negotiation, and then also the different packages of options that you can pick. So the first step in a mutual gains approach process is preparing. So you want to understand the interests of both sides and also the alternatives that are present. The second would be creating the value. So this is kind of the idea of the value proposition again. You want to invent the value for each side without necessarily committing to what that value is, because since you have alternative options, you never know what will shake out. Finally, the third step is distributing the value. So based on the legitimacy of each option, you would then determine which one holds more value. And then finally, 4 would be the follow through, which is planning for what you could do with an agreement, what potential issues could come up when you do end up negotiating, things like that. All right, so the last part is communicating. So I think we have time for this activity. But you guys have to promise me we're gonna do it really fast, but it's really fun. So we need partnering up again, and one person's gonna draw again. So do that really quickly, decide who your partner is gonna be. Okay, so for whoever the drawer is going to be, I actually need you guys to face away from the screens. Do not peek. I'm watching you. Face away from the screens. Just the drawer. Just the drawer. Face. Just don't look at the screen. All right. So for those of you that did not elect to be the drawer, your job is much more difficult. So I'm going to put an image on the screen here. Okay. You are going to help this person that you're partnered with draw this image, but they can't look at it. So you need to be very clear about what you're telling them to do. Okay? Can you click? Oh yeah. Don't tell them what the picture is. Okay. Go. Okay, so for those of you that are a little confused about what I mean by doing this, so if I was going to start, I'd say, okay, go to the top or like middle left of the paper and draw a downward C, something like that. Get creative.
Yeah, it's like we only have 2 more slides. I appreciate it.
Okay, when you're done, raise your hand so I know. All right, can I get everybody back here? Guys, woo. Well done. So how many of you liked that activity? Show of hands. Yeah? Only 3? Oh, okay, here we go. There's some more. All right, so how many of you thought that was really hard? Yeah, okay. So, as you can see from the activity that we did, all right, thank you guys. So as you can see from the activity, I'm sorry if not all of you got to finish it, but I'm just trying to make sure that we got through everything. As you can see, communication is really difficult because a lot of times, no matter how simple it is what you're trying to do, you still have like issues, for example, like how do I tell them to draw a curved tail, or how do I create these ears? When you're talking about project expectations, or when you're talking about just feedback for somebody, a lot of communication issues can occur just because sometimes what you're saying is not necessarily how the person is intending it. This happens in our presentation, right? There were a lot of things that we put up here that you guys raised your hand and didn't understand, and we didn't even consider how you would read it, just because for us, it seemed like it was very clear, right? So these communication issues happen all the time. So we're gonna look at two main ways that you communicate with your teams and try to give you some advice for how to do that a little bit better. So the first one we're gonna look at is emails. How many of you send emails? That should be literally everyone. Yeah. So all of us get a lot of emails every day. I know sometimes we all wake up and we're like, oh my God, I don't even want to look at what's in my inbox right now. We all have those mornings. Communicating via email, both with your team and with external stakeholders, is going to be one of the most important and most common ways that you end up communicating. So getting it right is very, very important. So here we've looked at a couple tips to help you guys kind of get through that initial hump of communicating in the most effective manner. So the first one, which is pretty common sense, is make sure they're concise. I know that a lot of times, especially when you have complex situations or problems, you want to explain them as much as you can, especially if it's an external stakeholder that really has a sway in what you're doing. However, making sure these emails are concise is key. And if you can't make an email concise, it's probably time to have a meeting or a phone call. Okay? The second one is have a call to action in your email. We actually suggest that you have this call to action twice. We suggest that you put it one time at the beginning and one time closer to the end. A lot of times people only read things for about 10 seconds, especially if they're really busy. So making sure that call to action is very clear is very important. The other thing is 6 to 10 word engaging subject line for your email, and make sure that it's very true to the content. A lot of times if it's important or if it's time sensitive, you're going to want to put that in brackets, right? So like if I'm sending an email to my manager and I need to know his answer in the next 2 hours, I will put in brackets time sensitive and then whatever the subject is, okay? You also want to ensure the email is easy to read on mobile devices. So what do I mean by this? All of us are on the go now. A lot of us have iPhones. I didn't have a cell phone until I was in 8th grade, but now it is permanently attached to my hand. And it's important that whenever you write an email, you actually make it readable for mobile users, because especially a lot of your senior managers or whoever is above will be reading it on the go because they're in meetings or they're in the car, wherever they need to be. So for that, we say try to limit what you're saying to 3 sentences per paragraph. That's the easiest way to make it readable on a mobile device. Do not assume privacy with your emails. This is very important. One, you want to make sure you never ever share someone else's private information via email. If you have to, you want to make sure you encrypt whatever document it is that you're sending. Also, never assume privacy if you are complaining or if you're upset about something. Your email can always be forwarded. You never know who's BCC'd. Make sure you don't do that. Verify all of your links before sending. This is a huge one. Whenever you try to hyperlink something, sometimes these links can break. You want to make sure that you're always verifying what links you're using before you actually send it out. Make questions as specific as possible. I know that you want to be polite, and a lot of times that complicates the way that you ask questions, but you need to make sure that the questions are concise and specific, especially when you're talking to somebody that is not going to read the email for very long because they're busy. Include a deadline for response if you need a response quickly. Make sure you say, I would appreciate hearing from you by Thursday COB or Thursday end of day, something like that. Do not send more than 3 follow-up emails to someone. This is a rule of thumb. If you believe that you have a good enough relationship with the person that you can do that, obviously use your best judgment. However, we typically say don't send more than 3 follow-up emails. If you have to do that, pick up the phone and call someone, because they're probably too busy to answer you. It is typically not acceptable, especially if you don't know the person, to follow up on an email within 48 hours unless it is truly urgent. Because if they haven't answered you, it probably means that they're very busy. And if you need to follow up urgently, you should probably have called them or try to see them in person. Another important thing is when especially if you're talking to someone that's busy, bold important information. One thing to keep in mind about this though is do not use bold too frequently. If you use bold in too many of your emails, it can come across as rude, and it can also be kind of like the girl that cried wolf or the boy that cried wolf, and people won't actually read the bold anymore. Sorry, we'll have to skip this activity just because we're out of time. And then the other thing is meetings. So the other time that you communicate a lot with your team or with external stakeholders is in meetings. So this is another thing that you want to be sure you're keeping consistently on top of. So there are 4 different kinds of meetings. that we mostly see. You have an information sharing meeting, a problem solving meeting, decision making meetings, and creative meetings. The purpose of an information sharing meeting is to discuss your project status or share pertinent information with team members. You want to make sure that you're using this meeting type sparingly, okay? So you can have any number of members in attendance for this meeting, but a couple things that you want to make sure of is one, that you allow for prep time. You want to make sure you go into these meetings with specific ideas of what you're discussing and all the materials that you need. You want to distribute any copies of reports prior to the meeting. And I don't mean like 5 minutes before the meeting, I mean like as much in advance as you can. You want to state how the information is relevant to the project. So if you're sharing a report, why am I looking at this report? What do I need to know about it? And finally, you need to determine the action needed. So if we're going into a meeting like this, you want to know that you need to be coming out with the answer for X, Y, or Z. For a problem-solving meeting, you're discussing situations that need to be addressed that affect the project outcome. So this meeting type should be limited to 4 people or fewer. Sorry, 5 people or fewer. You list suggestions to solve problems or issues, you consider advantages and disadvantages of each idea, and you decide on required changes and establish action items based on this information and based on this discussion. Decision-making meetings are to make decisions that require more than one person to make them. So this meeting type typically has 10 people or fewer in attendance, and you're deciding on basically the method for decision-making, discussing options, and eventually coming to a decision and what action items need to happen. The numbers that we're including on here of how many people need to be in meetings is so that the meetings are actually effective. Once you reach a certain threshold of people, the meetings become ineffective because you have too many people weighing in and it becomes kind of a circuitous like conversation. Finally, you have creative meetings. So this is more along the lines of like maybe a design thinking meeting. So you would discuss ideas for concepts, new product development, increased production, marketing, things like that. You would typically want to have fewer than 15 participants, and it's typically a 2 to 4 hour long meeting, but it can be longer or shorter depending on what you need. And essentially for this, you want to state the purpose of the meeting, use idea generating techniques, maybe like design thinking, and evaluate ideas that come out from it, and then based on that, do an action plan. Essentially, one key thing is you always want an action plan and always want next steps coming out of each of these meetings. And then really quickly, we'll run through this and then we'll be done. So for facilitating meetings, you want to ensure that you're considering the direction. Where is the meeting headed? You want to always be considering the tone. How are you coming off to your team members? How are you coming off to external stakeholders? What do they think of you? That interpersonal awareness that we were talking about earlier. Scope. So you want to make sure that you're guiding the scope of the meeting and making sure that no matter who may enter their thoughts or kind of maybe go on tangents, that you're always bringing it back to that initial scope of what the initial problem or issue that the meeting was brought together for. And then finally, ownership. You want to ensure that coming out of the meeting, there's clear ownership of who holds what. So if there's a next step, who is responsible for that next step? If there's a deliverable that needs to be created, who is responsible for that deliverable? I know from personal experience that if someone goes, we need to do this, tools and skills portion. Now we are going to move on to a different activity. If you guys have any questions about that, please just come up and have a conversation with us during lunch or anytime after. And if you need our emails because you would like to have a discussion over the phone or via email, just let us know.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sam and Alicia. Thank you so much. Awesome, and to all of you for bearing with us, and excellent. So Scott, you are on now for our 5 facts introduction.
Okay, how are we doing? Pretty good? Look, I know we started a little late. I know we're running a little bit late. I don't even know if you guys have even had a break, but we are going to stand up, create a large circle in the outer parts of this room. We are going to do, not speed 5 facts, but not like 3-hour 5 facts. Do some more proper introductions for our new fellows. Then once we're done that, I'm almost positive we're going right into lunch. Okay, so let's get up and create a big circle around this room, okay? Big oval. Okay, form a big circle. Come on around this way. Come on around this way. Okay. We need some more people on that side over there. I'll hit. Yeah, I'll have that card. Start with Evan. Well, we're just gonna